So my dog size, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh,
Um,
pleasure. Well, joining you in the COVID sense of the term, that we are sat in front of laptops,
sat in
as
front of
opposed to being in a pub, which would have been the perfect opportunity
well, that
for
would have
you.
been nice, wouldn't it? Yes, and yeah, getting a bit stressed out at the connection initially with the Zoom thing. But, we made it. We made it, and that's
Absolutely, yeah.
achievement for the day. I mean, you were going to be, you should have been in kind of Bristol now, shouldn't you? You should have been painting it up fest. So is that a bit of
It's the that thing. I suppose it's happening to a lot of people that you open your diary for the day as to see what you're doing, and you get these kind of hideous reminders that you're supposed to be down in Bristol with all your compadres drinking cider and painting walls, or you're supposed to be flying off to San Cremento, or you're supposed to be doing this and that and the other. It's a harsh thing when you pick up your calendar and realise that where you should be and what you should be doing. But we're all learning to adapt and survive, I suppose, under current situations. I'm by far, from where a lot of people are really, really struggling. So I'm kind of lucky in that way. But it's a little bit of a kick in the teeth when you think about all the places that you should be and could be, and all the people that you could be having fun with. But there we go. Sun's out.
We'll take that. We'll take that. And I'm speaking to you now. You doing some studio work as well. So is that kind of, has that picked up while the other the outdoors work or travel has dropped off?
Yeah, I suppose I've got a mural practice, but also a studio practice. So I'm kind of lucky. Studio practice really isn't affected. It's a short walk from studio's a short walk from home. I'm there on my own, so I haven't got any issues in that form. It's a strange one. I've got plenty of time to paint in the studio, but at the moment, the idea of finding a gallery to put on a show is is not quite on the cards at the moment. So producing work, coming up with ideas, trying to develop projects. I had a big project that was due to happen this year, and with Arts Council funding in place, and all that fell through when COVID hit. So I don't want to completely shelve the project. So I'm trying to kind of find other ways to make it happen. So, but this is the same for anybody or any business, or you can sit there and cry because it's pretty full on and it's pretty heartbreaking. Or you can use the creative side of your brain and think, right, okay, this is where I am. I have to face the fact that this is where I am and this is what's happening. I'm not going to these places. I'm not painting these walls. I haven't got these projects. What can I do? How can I still have fun and use my creativity and plow forwards, really.
And one thing I saw that you did recently was for Mental Health Awareness Week, and that was your paste ups in Portsmouth with kind of positive messages using your everyman.
Yeah, my everyman's kind of like my meditation. I have two or three different styles. I suppose I probably should be two or three different artists. You might have seen my sort of crushed tin cans, or the kind of reflective eyes, or my quiet little voices characters, or you may have seen this kind of really naive, white, blocky stick man that I paint. And he's been around probably the longest of all my styles. Most of it is finger painted. So there are days when I don't want to pick up a 000 brush and start painting eyelash reflections in an eye. I just want to get lost. So loud music goes on, the finger paints come out, and I have a lot of fun. And when lockdown first hit, and I had the kind of my entire year was thrown. I knew I had to keep busy. What I didn't want to do is sit at home just feeling sorry for myself. So I hit the studio, found a load of paste up paper, and just started kind of throwing those together. And I kind of threw them together without really thinking about the purpose of them. It was just really an act of meditation, of just painting and not worrying too much, not thinking about what's going to happen this week, next year, or whatever. And then ended up with a kind of pile of these pile of these paste ups, and then somebody announced, oh yeah, it's mental health. It was on the radio. It's mental health awareness week, and it was just like, oh man, the stars aligned. I've got this pile of paper that I've been using to help keep my head sane, and it's mental health awareness week. I know people are struggling out there for all sorts of reasons, mentally, physically, socially. And the whole concept of that everyman is that you take something which tugs at the heartstrings. It's basically a child's drawing, right? And every parent will stick that image on their fridge, of their kids painting, however naive it is, but by kind of subverting it very slightly and putting very kind of grown-up themes in the phrases that I use with them, it adds this whole new level of melancholy, innocence, and so bucket of paste, out for a walk, wander around town, pop them up. The city that I live in, Portsmouth, are kind of used to seeing them by now. If I'm away, then I'm pasting them up when I'm away, but if I'm home and I've got a pile of them, then I'll go and do that. And I did, and it's been lovely. The feedback from people who've seen them and related to them has been, all that I can ask, really. I paste them up and walk away, and then they become their own thing. And I, almost kind of forget about them, but every now and again, I'm reminded when I get a nice message from someone who has seen it and it's connected with.
It's quite powerful, really, for something so simple, and it must be quite rewarding, actually, when you get that, when you get that feedback. Is that something, with your art, that you just really want to create some kind of connection with the person who looks at it?
Yeah, definitely. I think, art in general is about getting people to look at their own life and look at the world that they're in a slightly different way. And I always think, street art is the perfect vehicle for that, because it's not just people that are looking for a cultural experience that walk into a gallery. They have the opportunity. They know that they want to kind of widen their understanding. This is about putting something out there that absolutely anybody, from a wee nipper to the old boy on the way to the pub, will walk past and see. And I don't really mind if the response is negative. If somebody walks in and sits down and going, oh, have you seen that mess on that wall again? What is that all about? Blah, blah, blah. And they sit, and they sit with his mates playing dominoes or whatever, and moan about it. It's actually altered their day in some way. It's actually made them stop and think about, there's this person, don't know who he is. He's going out and he's putting something there that I'm now looking at and I'm having to think about. And so for me, that's just what art is about in general. So if I can tap into something which a huge number of people are kind of forced to engage with, then it's successful in my part.
And you've been doing your Free Art Friday as well as another thing for quite a while now. So that's kind of another avenue there. How did that all come about?
Well, I didn't fall into the sort of street art scene through graph or anything like that. I've always been a creator of some sort. In the 90s, it was rave backdrops, and 80s, it was leather jackets. And I've always been, I had a paintbrush in hand, but wisely, my dad said, go and get a proper job. So I fell into a career in teaching as opposed to art, and always kind of dabbled on the side. And I saw what was happening on the street art scene and just thought, this is so democratic. It's so open and accessible for everybody that I want in. But by that point, I had the mortgage and the pension plan, and I was a parent for the first time. And it was just like, okay, I'm a primary school teacher. If I get arrested for painting directly onto walls illegally, which is all it all was then I've lost my job, my wife and kids, my house. So it was my fluffy approach to stepping into the street art world was to initially just take paintings I was making at home and leave them on the street, and then move into taking rubbish that I found on the street, painting it, and then putting it back where I found it. My thought was that I was kind of helping the community by clearing the rubbish that was dumped in the town centre. If someone left a door there, I would bring it home, paint it, put it back where I found it, and then 24 hours later, someone would pick it up, take it home, and stick it on the wall. So it was a fluffy way into street art, really, and it was something that I was always ever a personal project, but has grown massively. I mean, I haven't been to a city anywhere in the world where there's not a community of people doing Free Art Friday in some format that I've been able to connect with, which is amazing, really cool.
Then from, I suppose, these, you said before about you could be three different artists. You've got the sort of the naive style of the everyman. You've got your cans, but then you've got these giant, well, some of the giant murals. For example, I'm thinking right now of the summer editions of Fest piece with Curtis Hilton last year, with those just stunning eyes and the level of detail in there. How do you go from one side the naive to
something you can paint with a finger to something? I don't know. I suppose it's nice that I can jump between those, and I'm not forced to do the same thing all of the time. I think my head would explode if I was just forced to take one of those and run with it. It's been one of those things that's slowly evolved over time. You look at some of the early eyes that I painted. There's nowhere near the level of detail, but when I paint, when I finish the painting, there's bits I like and there's bits I don't like. The bits I like, I keep and improve and use those into the next painting. The bits I don't like are the bits that I try and evolve and practice and get better at, so that I can include those. So every time I paint an eye, it might not be noticeable for other people, but there's one new thing in there that I haven't tried before, even if it's just the shape of an eyelash or the shadow underneath it, or the way that the wick inside the middle of the eye changes colour slightly. All those things. I'm one of those artists that likes to do the same thing again and again and again, and just refine it and refine it and refine it. And just like the everyman, it's about those narratives, those little stories. You wonder why that everyman is saying that sad phrase and looking at you with these kind of melancholic eyes. But in the same format, if you look in the reflection, you start thinking, who is that's being reflected back? What's happening to them? Is it me that is being reflected back through that window? And who owns the big eye? Whose is that big eye? And what are they looking at? And so you've got these little narratives, these stories that are bouncing backwards and forwards. And for me, I don't want to make it too obvious, but I want people to look at it and start building their own stories of who's in there, whose eye it is, who's reflected back. And over time, I started painting them small. In fact, the first eyes were on the tin cans that you would have seen, and opportunities have arisen. I've had the opportunity to kind of get bigger and bigger. That brings its whole new technical kind of questions. When I did a 13-story wall with Snub 23 over in Shenzhen in China off a Chinese scaffold, and just the whole technical side of painting a wall which was covered in scaffold and shielded so you couldn't step back and see it, is one of those kind of head scratching things. You've got to go, right, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to paint a 13-story building without being able to see what it looks like complete? And that's when grids come in.
Is there excuse me, and do you have a natural head for heights, by the way? Because that's very tall.
Oh no, I so don't. It took me 4 days to get halfway up the scaffold, and I never did get to the top. The original plan was that my eye was at the top, and then Snub's isometric cubes would kind of scatter its way down. And after the 4th day of being there and only being able to get halfway up the scaffold, I was just like, right, yeah, we need to move the eye down the plan. So, oh no, I hate it. I'm all right on a boom lift when I've got a harness holding me in, and I'm pressing the buttons up and down. But climbing ladders and climbing scaffold, there's no fun in that.
Yeah, I gained a new appreciation. Not that I didn't appreciate in the first place these giant murals. But when Cosmo Sarson was painting a piece in Blackburn last year, and I went up on his platform, and it was probably like 80 to 100, 80 feet, something like that. It's a bit wobbly, this. And I don't really like it very much. How can you concentrate?
Yeah, no, I was watching the do you know the Nomad Clan?
Yeah.
They painted is it Europe's tallest mural? I don't know, a massive tower block. And they were on those window window cleaning towers that were on ropes, and they were just saying, it was swinging from a meter across. And yeah, it's bad enough on the boom lift when it, wobbles around a bit. You get press a roller against it and the whole, thing wobbles.
Mm.
You get your sea legs after a while, but yeah, it definitely takes a bit getting used to.
That's what
At
always
least when it's
amazes
that high, you don't have to worry about how much detail you put in there. You can be a little bit rough around the edges. So no one's going to see it from the bottom.
It's one thing that always amazes me, actually, is how kind of, I guess to me anyway, perfect they look. I mean, you mentioned the grid system before, but I was thinking, how if it's windy up there, how do you manage to avoid kind of blurring or smudging and all of this kind of stuff as well?
Yeah, every wall brings its own challenges beyond the deciding what you're going to paint, I think, and that can make it fun and it can make it frustrating, and you can get through some walls and just love every second of it, and you can start on day one and everything can go wrong. The paint order wasn't correct, or it didn't arrive properly, you ran out of this color, or the wind's blowing, so you're having to try and sort of shield the wall when you're painting. I remember painting a wall in Cheltenham a few years ago, and it pissed with rain, absolutely pissed with rain the entire time. So I had a towel in one hand and a spray can in the other, and I would literally dab the wall dry in that square foot and then spray the line. And the scissor lift had a little metal rim around the floor plate, so it was a foot deep in water, and I was just sort of paddling the entire week. Wow. So yeah, there are lots of challenges, but once you started and everyone knows that's going to be a Mike Dog wall, you can't really stop until it's done. You just got to crack on and stick the music on a little bit louder and have an extra beer at the end of the night as a reward and move on from there.
Is there a kind of whether it's a favorite place you painted or a favorite piece, or particularly I'm thinking of murals, but something where everything's just clicked into place and you've just felt great doing it and you've been happy with the result at the end of it?
Yeah, one of my favorite. I mean, there may be better walls, I don't know, but one of my favorite projects was a project called the Forgotten Project, which is in Rome. And the Forgotten Project are only a small group of guys that just pull some funding together wherever they can on a low budget, but found me an amazing 700-year-old wall in the center of Rome, which was crumbling and falling apart on the side of an old hospital. But I think everything about the project worked beautifully. They were brilliant. I was really well looked after. The food in Rome is just off scale. And because they were locals, they took me to all the right places to get, I love my food. So it was a really nice opportunity to eat my way through Rome. The wall was beautiful. Some artists we put off by the fact that it was so old and gnarly, but for me, it worked really, really well. And the community around were just so on board with what I was doing. I was able to include in the reflection of the eyes about 100 people who were either born who had died in the hotel. So all the locals sent me photographs of family members, and I was able to include those in the reflections of the eyes. I did 500 eyes in 5 days on this wall, which was just insane. I was just working 12, 15 hours a day. But it was just that culmination of, there's nothing worse than flying halfway around the world to stay in a shitty Airbnb on your own and not see anybody, and paint a wall in bad weather where the colours haven't turned out. Even if it's a cool place, it can be, that can be lonely when you're away from your family and stuff. But if everything lines up and you've got a really nice bunch of people and they're open to you visiting their city and you can liaise and work with the community and have a good time and eat good food, then I love it.
Perfect. And is that community connection, really important as well? That you've got that buy-in from the community as well. That there's stories there in that case as well.
I think it's absolutely essential. Who am I to arrive in a place, in a culture that maybe I don't have much of an understanding for, and paint whatever the fuck I want? In their city, that just seems disrespectful, and I don't think it gives the community any ownership. So as much as I can, if I can spend time getting to know the people that are going to see this every day and to get their feeling about what they feel about the place that they live in, the place that I've been invited to come and paint in, and I think it benefits not only me, because I gained some new cultural experiences, but also the community around get to have a say in what we as visitors are doing there.
And bringing it back home for a second, and with that community aspect in mind, you did, I think it was a year or two ago, the mural to help the homeless community in Portsmouth as well.
Yeah, that was a funny one. There was a boarded up cafe that had been there for years, just getting tagged looking a mess. So I decided I would stick one of my everyman on there, and it was in Southsea, so I just called it the Southsea Hug, and that was all well and good. And then I did a print release off the back of that, because lots of people were liking it. And then I noticed while I was painting it, so many homeless people, coming to have a chat or just sit, and it's a tough gig, right? So yeah, I did the print release and raised some funds for that, which was great. And then I rotated the mural every sort of year and did a new piece. And then someone came along and tagged right across the front of the whole piece. And ironically, they wrote "Feed the Homeless" right across this piece, which was kind of strange, seeing as that's exactly what I did by writing a couple of grand with a print release. But I thought, well, okay, rather than get pissed off by it, let's do exactly what they don't expect you to do. So I did get rid of the tag, but I extended the everyman, and then where his hands were, I added hooks and screwed shopping bags, and then every day I filled it with food so that anybody who did need anything could come and take it away. And then the whole community jumped on board, and then every time I walked past, every hour, there was new food in the bags, so that the community that were in trouble, those people that didn't have the opportunity to, nip into Tesco's and buy what they needed, could come and grab some bits and pieces. So I kind of, I'm not sure if that's what the tagger was expecting. I think they were expecting to piss me off, but actually what they did is they spurred the community on to do something really good. So yeah, I'm going to do what I can and highlight the difficulties of, my city and many cities. I think it's an important, to do as an artist.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing to come from that, really, because like you said, I mean, every city's got its issues with homelessness, and I suppose too often, it's hidden away in a doorway or whatever, or hidden in plain sight actually, and people can walk past and not notice it and not do anything. So to actually have that must have been incredibly rewarding, actually. Although by the same token, having the problem there is it's kind of heartbreaking, but actually to have that buy-in and to see some good going to that, really it's never quite enough, is it? The more you do, the more you realize there is to do, and then I could spend every waking hour producing work to raise money for that, but I also have to keep a roof over my head and keep the kids in school shoes and those bits and pieces. So there's that balance of doing as much as you can, trying not to feel too guilty about not doing more. I do as much as I can, but I also have to, art is my only income, so I've got to survive as well. And what about it's probably really difficult to say in the current situation with lockdown, but kind of next projects or, anything coming up? Yeah, well, I think I mentioned there was a big project that got pulled. I'm hoping to continue it, but do it on the sort of on the cheap, really, just paying for it myself. A smaller scale project, but that's involving a film, a book, and a very beautiful but very derelict building that I've discovered. And in fact, it ties in with what we were talking about, and the plight of the homeless, people living in doorways, when in most major cities there are huge empty buildings sat doing nothing, rotting away. And so I'm working on a piece at the moment. I'm not sort of trying to give away too much, but I'm working on a piece at the moment that will hopefully won't happen this year now, but it will happen next year. But it's a big project that I'm driving towards. So taking over doing the bits and pieces on social media, and then, like most artists, there are also a few things sort of stoking the fires with little secret projects that will hopefully come out at some point soon. Yeah, I'm terrible at these things. I give away far too much information that I should do. Shut up, Paul. Don't say anything. Yeah. Oh, well, watch your space. I still need to visit Pompey, actually, for the the Play Dead gallery you've got there. Yeah, Play Dead gallery. Yeah, Fox Studio, which is just around the corner, which is there's a really good scene. I know it's not huge, but there's a really good scene down here. Really good community of graph writers and street artists.
all working together. There was always that, you know, in lots of cities, there's that kind of, it's always the balance of graph and street art, and, you know, often wasn't cohesive, I suppose we should say. But I think the city, our city, sorted it out really well as a community now. So yeah, the graphics and street artists work in unison really nicely for a positive impact for the city, I think.
Well, on the list for post-lockdown travel. I've been meaning to go for a while.
Anytime, yeah.
And just finally, I was just going to ask: are there any sort of artists who you're really into at the minute, or someone who you think people should be looking out for, or
Oh gosh, if we just, like everyone else, I spend my life scrolling and falling in love with images multiple times daily, and then as soon as somebody says name one of them, you go, oh, I don't know. I'm utterly in love with Actual Void at the moment. Well, at the moment, have been for a long time. Opportunity to see, he's Miami based now, and had the opportunity to see a few of his pieces over the last couple of years. It's so far removed from what I kind of stepped into as far as sort of street art and graffiti goes. It's kind of almost oil painting on a large scale, beautiful dark pieces. He's definitely not new and someone that people wouldn't recognize, but I'm enjoying his work at the moment. It's always number one on my list, the Hero Cut, the German duo. I end up, my work gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and I look at what they do, and there's this beautiful balance of tightness and looseness, and that's, I'm always striving towards the balance of those two things. But equally, on the flip side, Noel over in Holland, super graphic cartoon style. Fark FK is the artist that introduced me to a spray can 15 odd years ago, and is back in the city in Portsmouth and back onto painting again. You will see no resemblance between my work and his work, but I have a lot of respect for him, and if he can, his line work is just perfect, absolutely perfect. So he's a good compadre. No, lost from there, but that's a few anyway.
And always learning, I suppose, from each other as well, as much as anything else.
Yeah, absolutely, and vibing off each other as well. When people are having a really good run and things are going well, you get a boost, you get a buzz, and I'm all about trying to keep everybody buzzing, keep everybody on it. If there are projects that I can't do, trying to pass those on in the hope that we can, we're not in competition. There's lots of artists that have this view that, we're competing against each other. That's bollocks. We should be supporting and encouraging everyone on every level. And, if you see a piece of work, you can get a little bit jealous because their work is better than yours, but celebrate the fact that their work is better than yours and that they're really, really on fire. And that will only sort of strive you to move forwards, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, and that feels like a good place to round off. I know you've got a studio session coming imminently, so I will.
List of jobs for a Monday morning that I really do need to get on with. But it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. So